How's it going, guys? So, in this little tutorial, I'm going to talk a little bit about lighting as well as paint effects. I've already painted in a few trees, painted a little line of grass. As you can see, I have a few textured materials in here. One thing I want to show you real quickly, if we were to render this right now, we would get this. As you can see, this is a little bit lighter. Part of that is Maya is actually setting up a default light, and you can't see it inside the scene. In fact, if we go here to lighting, use all lights, you'll see that it's completely shaded out. So the other thing is, during default lighting, you remember how this one looked. If we come here and do a render of this side from this angle, you'll see it looks very similar. The downside about default lighting is if you're doing a batch render and you do a partial render or something like that, the lighting will look different whenever you render out the next set. Also during taking stills. You won't have good shadows or anything like that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a light. And you'll do that by coming up here to rendering. And then right here you have your ambient light, directional light, point light, spotlight, and area light. Now you also have a volume light, but you will never use that one, or at least I never have used that one. The two light shapes I like to use the most are going to be spotlight and directional light. Ambient light is nice because it works similar to the sun, but directional light is nice because it works very similar to that. However, it basically works as like, trying to think of how to explain this. It's basically set to direction. So which way these arrows are pointing, as you can see, whichever way these arrows are pointing is the direction of the light. So the light, if we were to line up like this, the light's going to be aiming at the entire scene like so. So the shadows will cast from behind all these objects at this angle. Right now, if we were to render this, you'll see that this is lighter, but this is blacked out, and that's because we don't have ambient light in the scene. And you could just add a spotlight and make it go the other direction. However, I want to show you what happens real quick, because the intensity of this directional light is set at a 1, and this ambient light is set at a 1. And this can be anywhere in the scene. It doesn't have to be one area or another. But whenever you render it, now you can see it's back to the way it looked before. So a simple fix to that would be tone down the value of the ambient light. And I'm actually going to come up here to Windows. I'm going to scroll down to Outliner. I'm just going to pop this window up. I'm actually going to move this off screen, but I'll let you know what I'm clicking on. So right now I want to select the directional light, and inside the outliner I just scroll down and click on directional light. So from here we're going to lower this intensity to 0.7. Now I know that's a higher value than a 1, but as you can see whenever we render it now, this has more of a soft look to it. But there are no shadows. You can simply enable shadows by coming in here. However, Mental Ray will calculate all those for you. So this gear icon with the clapper behind it, and that's what these items right here are called. Not inside Maya, but in general in Hollywood, these are called clappers. So inside that clapper with the gear icon, where it says render using, you're going to come down here and click on Mental Ray. If you do not have Mental Ray, simply come up here to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and you're just going to scroll all the way to the bottom where you'll see Maya to MR. That is Maya to Mental Ray. Make sure it's selected on Loaded, and if you want it to load every time, make sure Auto Load is selected as well. So right now I'm going to leave all these values the same except for the image size. The image size I'm going to render 640 by 480. And the reason for this is because while I'm recording, the renders won't take as long. So if we come up here and click on this one, which is render the current frame, we'll wait for this to render out. You can already see that that's looking a lot better, a lot more of what we'd expect. However, we have some pixelation, and that doesn't really look very real. The other problem is that these shadows are real hard. They have real sharp edges. So on the outliner, I'm going to click on the ambient light. I'm going to delete this. is what we're going to use for our lighting in our scene instead of directional light, which we'll still keep this, but we'll lower the value to, say, 0.25. We'll keep that right there for the time being. Is what I want to do is I want to bring in an HDR map. Now, an HDR map, just simply type in HDR map or maps, HDR map free. And this will bring up, under images, this will bring up different options. And you'll notice that these are really swirly. Well, that's okay. So I'm just going to click on one of these. I want one that's fairly sunny. So that this one looks... Okay, so I'm just going to click on this image, and I'm just going to go ahead and save image as. And this is going to be a very low resolution, and make sure it's JPEG or PNG. When you download these, usually they're actually like EXT files, if they're like full-on high-def res. Now this is going to look kind of blocky whenever we render it out, but it'll give you a pretty good idea. So we want to come back up here to our settings, our render settings, and in the scene tab, we're going to scroll down where we see image base lighting under the environment. So we're just going to hit create. And you can also just create a physical sun sky, but I'm going to show you how to do an HDR map. So we'll minimize that, and right here under the image name, we'll click on the folder, and we're just going to look for where we saved that to, and I honestly don't know where we saved that to. Oops. Let's see. Where did we save that? Let me come back here. Show in folder, and it is on my desktop. Okay, it's numbered, that's why. That's why I'm not seeing it. So it's this one right here. Duh. So essentially this is what you should see now. And the sun is actually over here, so I'm going to click on my directional light, and I want to make sure that it's going this direction. So all I'm going to do is just move this right here. I'm going to rotate it right about there where this is lined up with the camera. I'm going to move it like so. So now the directional light is facing the same direction that the sun is. And as you can see, whenever I render this out, I'm going to go ahead and hit render real quick, and we'll render one single frame. You can already see that it's starting to look way better. So the next thing I want to show you, leaves. I'm going to render these out, and actually those don't look half bad. And this time, instead of closing this window out, I'm actually going to leave it open. So I'll bring that back here in just a second. If we come over here to the simple leaf shader and go in here to color, there's not really a whole lot of options. I mean, it's kind of generic. As what we want to do is we actually want to apply some depth to it. I guess you'd say depth, because right now this is just blah. It kind of sucks. Like there's no bump mapping or anything. So Maya actually has textures inside the file. Give me 1 second and I will load those up. Okay, so now that I have pulled those up, it's actually going to be located, oops. It's actually going to be located in your C drive. Then you should see an Autodesk folder. Inside the Autodesk folder, it's Autodesk Maya, the version you installed. And then inside there's going to be x64, Maya, Autodesk, Maya 2016, and then brush images. I'm just going to let you pause the video so this way you can type all this out. So now that you've done that, we can just simply come through here and we can see what all textures there are. Now sometimes you'll come up to these where it's like a weird camera eye, and that's actually F-check. That's what it needs to be loaded with. So I don't know where F-check is installed, but I already have it set up, so all I have to do is just double click it. And you're going to see this weird window pop up like this. So that's F-check. You're going to see that very commonly. And this is what we want to find is we want to find the leaf. Oak bark, we're going to need that one. Oak leaf. You know what? Why not? So I'm actually going to copy this, and then right here I'm going to go into color, and I'm going to click on selected color. I'm going to come in here to file. I'm actually going to paste that. I don't know why I just pasted it there. Boy, my apologies, y'all. That came out of nowhere. So I'm going to copy this up here. We're just going to scroll over to oak leaf. Where are you at? Oak bark, oak leaf. There we go. So we'll just open that one. And then we'll come back. And for this, we're going to load up the same one. So we'll click here, come back over here to oak leaf, and we got this one open. Now one thing I want to show you is when you render this, now I don't know why I did a full render. Usually I do I should have just done a render region. But when you open this, this is looking better, but now it looks kind of weird. It doesn't have depth. So I'm just going to minimize that for now. To give it depth, we need a bump map. And one other thing you can do before I go too far into this, this value right here was lighter, and this one was darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come into this file. If we click on color balance and scroll down, we can actually move this slider down just a little bit so that way it darkens the image. Give it a little bit extra. Bump mapping, we're going to click on the checker, file, and then under file, bump depth. Actually, I want to change this to 0.2. So file 4, we're going to scroll back up, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to apply the same texture. Normally, whenever you do this, you'll actually have like a black and white image with the grayscale in it. So this way the gray areas will define medium bumps. White, if I remember correctly, defines bumps at its highest value, and black means no bump at all. So I'm actually going to select this small region. Now this icon right here will be render region, and this one will be render entire scene. So I just want to render this small region right here. You can see that there is a slight difference. Let me go ahead and just select right here, and let me go ahead and render that region. Probably can't see too much of a difference because we are kind of far away, but it there. So for the tree, let's go ahead and just click on the bump mapping real quick while we're here. And this one inside that same folder, this is going to be, let's just do the oak white bark. We'll apply that. And then from there, the bump depth, actually, let me see what that looks like real quick. Let me just select this right here, render that region. You know what? I'm happy with that. We're going to leave it alone. In fact, let's go and bring up the bump depth on the leaves as well, because why not? If you didn't see the bump 2D one, all I do is just click on this arrow, and that will back it up one. So I'm actually going to make this a 0.5. And now when we open up our render window and render this small region, see what that looks like. There we go. That has... I might go ahead and bump this up some more, but I'm kind of hesitant. You know, I'm going to leave it alone. Okay, so back to the bark. It's, I missed something. Oh, there we go. Color. Okay, so we have from black to white. So we're going to do the same file on both of those. And so I'm just going to do the white bark. And then I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to do the black bark, or not black bark, but just the bark in general. So right here, and then I'm going to go back. I want to click on this one. I'm going to make this one darker. And so once again, I'm actually going to move this one down quite a bit. That might be too much. There we go. And now when we render this, I'm going to render this region right here. As you can see now, it's looking more like a tree. So that's how you do the bump depth and the diffuse on painted textures such as trees. Grass, you don't really have to worry about that. Let me get the trees out of the render settings or the render view. So I'm going to render the grass at this angle. I'm going to go ahead and save it real quick, just be on the safe side. So I'm going to render the entire frame. And you can see that does look okay, but it feels empty. I don't know how else to describe it. It just feels empty. So what's going on is, once again, we don't have bump mapping or color. I don't know if that file folder has that or not. Let me come in here. Let's see, grass. Look what we have right here. Oh, but this is just a regular texture file. That sucks. Okay, that's not a problem. So there are other shaders that Maya offers, or other materials that Maya offers. So I'm going to click on bump mapping real quick, and I'm going to choose grid. There we go. Bump value, no. Bump depth, there we go. Bump depth, I'm going to say 0.5. Grid 1, this is where the U width and the V width come into play. I'm actually going to move the V width down to 0. I'm going to leave the U width the same. And the next thing we want to do is we want to repeat this pattern. So I'm going to click on this arrow that's facing this way. And for the UV, we know we have V set to 0, so we're not worried about that. We're more worried about this. I'm going to make it 16. So now if you press this icon right here, you don't see anything. And if I were to make this wider, you'll start to actually see a lot more. But I'm going to keep this value right about here. So now if we come up here to, looks like I closed that window out. Oh well, we'll just render this entire frame real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see now the grass actually has believable texture to it. Finally, the last thing I want to discuss in here, to give it the proper shadows, because if we render this, I just want to show you this real quick. The shadows look good. You know, for image-based lighting, they look, you know, believable. But if you have a cloudy scene, we'll go in here to quality. If you have a cloudy scene, you're going to want to ramp these up just a little bit. Filter size, this is basically, I want to say, the best way I can describe it is just how smooth it looks. You come down here under scene, we'll click on lights. No, that's, yeah, shadows. That's what I'm looking for. So shadow method, segments. We're going to keep this one where it's at, and we want to make sure this is set to obeys light linking. And then format, we want to make sure that this is set to detail. The rest of this should be fine. I always double check these, or not always, but usually I do. The last thing I want to do is I want to come in here to the outliner, and I'm actually going to come down here to shadows. We're going to enable depth map. I'm going to bring the filter size up. Bias probably right about there. If you want fog, you can always increase this as well. In fact, I'll show you the difference between the two here in just a second. So now that we have done that, I'm going to move this over, and I'm actually going to zoom in right here. So this would be right about, I'm going to say right about here on the region. Okay, so we actually need to bring the filter size down just a little bit. Nope, it's the bias. My bad. Okay, what am I... Oh, resolution. The higher this is, the longer it takes to render, but the it'll look a lot better. So now, this should be clearer. There we go. And as you can see, it does have the smoothness. It doesn't have these super sharp angles. So I'm going to bring the filter size back up to 3, because I'm pretty sure that's where I'm going to want it. There we go. Still a little blurry, so I'm going to bring this down to a 2. I'm going to increase this just a little bit. And if we render this, I can live with that. So now we're going to render this entire scene. In fact, I'm going to click on this plane and I'm going to move it forward just a little bit. And so now when we render this scene, I'll click right here. And we'll wait for it to finish. I'm using a real high depth map shadow. That's why it's taking so long to actually to render, if you're all wondering about that. But those are essentially the effects you'll get. So as you can see, the grass looks smooth, the shadows on this look smooth. And to give you an idea on the difference of lighting, if I click on my directional light, now let's just say I delete that. This is strictly off of the HDR lighting. So this is why it's important to have another light in the scene with HDR image lighting or based image lighting. It gives it that nice, soft, shadowy effect. So fog shadow intensity. I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to want it to be fairly intense. So let's say a 6. So you remembered what it looked like before. I'm just going to render this region. You can't really see it, so I'm just going to render the whole thing. Diet Cola, good. Now we don't really see a whole lot of fog, and that's kind of making me scratch my head right now. I may not have it enabled. I don't know. But that's generally how you do it. Usually when it comes to fog, I'll use a spotlight for that. But now we want this to be a little bit brighter. So I'm actually going to come up here. I'm going to change this to 0.5, and I'll let you be the judge of which one you like better. So that's basically how you do lighting with Mental-Ray. And it's been a few years since I've used this, so I don't remember all the little tricks and things like that to it. You would think I would, but I don't. I apologize. Wrong window. So if you want, let me come down here. No, that's not it. It's got to be under quality. Is it volume? No. Although I will go ahead and increase this to 3. So right now, what I'm looking for is, I don't think it's under any of these. Yeah, it is, but this isn't quite the same that I remember it. This basically, I'm trying to think how to explain this. I'll just show you. Oh, indirect diffuse. This will take longer, but if you have Final Gather on, I want to show you this real quick. Final Gather is a very powerful thing, and it takes a lot of graphics card, GPU, as well as taking a lot of CPU usage. But it is just incredible on what Final Gather can do. And you'll see that this looks kind of blocky and blah, but that's one region with the directional light. If I delete it, let me come back up here to this. I'm going to render, I'm actually going to go ahead and render this entire segment right here. That's probably too much. I'm going to render this entire segment right here. And so this way you can see part of it, or you can see this area without all that, but then you also see this as well. So that's the difference between Final Gather without directional light, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. There we go. So one last thing is, let's say on your picnic table, and I just have these wood down here to give you an example. Oh yeah, I keep coughing. I do not know why. So I'm just going to create a simple glass item. For those of you who were viewing this last night, you know why. It's still really funny. Because apparently I cannot read. So I'm just going to select just the top of this. I'm going to click on this button, which is Extrude. I'm going to press R on the keyboard. I'm going to scale in. I'm going to press G on the keyboard again. I'm going to scale down. Right about there. So from here I'm going to select these vertices up here. I'm just going to scale these out. I'm going to scale these out. And now we have the world's shortest drinking glass. There we go. It's the world's shortest, but comparatively, because these are 2x4s, it's probably the world's biggest. It's like a two-handed cup right there. So I'm going to come in here. I actually want to smooth this. So I'm just going to smooth this out real quick. The reason why I'm adding these, so this way I keep all my hard edges that I want. I'll add one down here, and then I'll add one right there. So if I come up here, object mode, select, mesh, smooth, where are you at? There you are. Let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and come up here to rendering, and I'm going to choose a blend material. That's Phong. This is blend. I'm going to choose a blend material. And under this material, I don't care about the color, I just care about the transparency. So I'm going to make it about like that, where it's almost completely see-through. And then for the, or actually before I do that, centricity, I don't know how to pronounce that word. I'm going to bring this up, spectacular roll-off, make that a little bit brighter. Reflectivity, we do want this reflecting the same. That's kind of going to be a requirement. So I'm going to make this, I'm just going to make it completely clear. So now I get to show you all something really cool. I'm going to render this. It's going to take a while. So if it takes too long, I'll see you here in a bit. Okay, so welcome back. As you can see, that looks real close, but it doesn't really refract the light, and it's way too bright. So what I'm going to do is right up here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. There we go. So this way I only have to worry about these three. Let me go and just turn that down because we don't really need it. So what I want to do is I actually want to, wait, I want to keep the spectacular color, but I want to lower the spectacular roll-off, and I'm just going to switch this to a Phong. It'll basically carry the same principles, but this way, let me tone that up. Let's see, right about there I want reflectivity. The other reason why this didn't actually bend light, because we actually need to come down here to ray trace options. The refractive index, that looks good. Refraction limit, that looks good. So we're going to turn on refractions. We're not going to have absorb any light. And the surface thickness, I'm just going to move this up to roughly 1.6. I'm going to crank this up on the refractive index too. I'm thinking probably 1.5 should be good. So let's go ahead and render this region right here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see a whole lot. That's going to be like wowing you or not, but we'll find out. So you can see where it's actually bending the wood now. However, it's still too bright. I don't like it. I'm going to lower the spectacular color. Go ahead and render one more time. Oh yeah, that's looking better already. There we go. So that actually looks really good. So let me go ahead and render this entire segment. I'll see you here in a bit. Alright, so that actually didn't take long at all. Now it looks like it's reflecting too much. So what I want to do is the reflectivity. I'm actually going to tone this down to about 0.178, and I actually want this bending. Bending a little bit more. So by doing this, you'll see that now we have a more realistic bend for a clear glass. You may also have to lower the spectacular color a little bit. There we go. I'm happy with that. So that's pretty much the basics on lighting. If you want your shadows to be darker, just simply come up here and let's go ahead and just increase this just a little bit, 0.7. And for this, let me go and tone that down. It's my hick accent, so I'm just going to render this small region right here. And keep in mind that you will not get light bending like this unless you are using Final Gather. If you're not using Final Gather, I don't think it will. We'll do a quick test run to make sure. So it doesn't look like increasing that is going to help me a whole lot with the shadows. I guess the only way to do it beyond that is to actually back off on the... That's not what I wanted. Select. There we go. The only way to actually get that is to back off on this. So I'm trying to remember how to do that. I can't remember how to... I'm not going to lie. I do not remember how to do this with Mental Ray. That's actually why I prefer... That's actually why I prefer Arnold rendering, because I've gotten so used to it here lately that... Oh, I don't want to emit photons. I've gotten so used to it here lately that it's just... It doesn't even faze me anymore. So, I'm not going to lie, y'all, I can't remember how to do this part as far as toning down the light from the image base lighting, but this is why we're not getting good, maybe this was it. But yeah, I can't remember how to do it with Mental Ray, I'm not going to lie. So we'll just render that real quick and we'll see what it looks like. Any day now. Yeah, you can see that the more tweaks you do, the harder you push it, you're going to start seeing that it's like going to get really mad at you. So that's definitely not the same we're looking for. I apologize, I cannot remember it. But other than that, you should have a pretty good... that's not it. You should have a pretty good idea on... as far as what to add. Actually, I just thought of something real quick. Where are you at? Set options? No. I know it's not under extra attributes. Photon emission. Not under legacy, I don't think. Oh. Oh. Actually, I don't want to use legacy. I want to come in here and move this color down. Resolution samples. I'm going to say 5. We're going to set this to high. Let's see if this fixes our problem. If I have to, I will switch over to legacy. Okay, so yeah, that was it. Basically, it's under light emission, and if you're not using legacy, you'll do it under advanced. If you choose to use legacy, then you're going to do all that down here. And this actually answers my question from last night, where the samples were, because I could not remember where they were. You can also change the color gain of the image right here. So, yeah, that's basically how you do it. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to set this from common. I'm going to set this to a full 1280 screen. The rest of this should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and render this real quick, and I'll see y'all here in just a little bit. Alright, so now that it has finished, I'm just going to zoom out real quickly so you can see this in its entirety. This is what the scene will look like whenever it's fully rendered. As you can see, it has a lot of realism to it. If you were to fully texture the ground, add the grass and everything like that, you know, I mean, this would be, well, except for the glass. The glass kind of takes away from it. But other than that, it would be considered photorealism. It would be photorealistic. And for the HDR image, if you found one that was high enough resolution, you could make people believe that this was a picture that was taken. Things like the wood, though, how they're all perfectly straight and well, not perfectly spaced, but they're just all straight, is what I would recommend for that. is if you place some wood down, just kind of like give each one a little bit of rotation, and that will make the scene far more believable that it's as far as it not being a photo or anything like that. So just by moving them like this just a little bit, I mean, you can really throw people for a loop. In fact, the one that I did of the picnic table scene, a lot of people would ask me, even at work, where was this picture taken? So that's basically how you achieve photorealism with Maya. I'm going to go ahead and save this scene real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and finish up on this, and I'll see y'all next time.